Hey ladies and gentlemen, AussieSC here, bringing you some more Starcraft 2 on this rainy day. This time we're casting some games from the Seat Story Cup. In the bottom left hand corner of Frost, it's going to be Rockat's Hyun. So Hyun absolutely blazing his way through this tournament, already fought his way through to the semi-finals here and looking to secure his place in the finals by defeating our Terran player in the top left hand corner. It's going to be Jjakji from Team My Insanity. Now Jjakji in great form, particularly as Zerg vs Terran has been very good thus far in the tournament, has met a lot of Zerg players on his way through, and now looking to try and get some traction against Hyun, but Hyun looking to be in great shape. Hyun already having taken game 1, though I gotta say it was a little bit of a battle. You can find the replay available on the net. I won't cast it due to length. It was an hour and a half. Rather than pop up a single video of that length, I like to cast a lot more games, give you a better idea of the spread and quality of games that occurred at Seat. So we will start this series at game 2. Sufficient to say that Hyun is at a 1-0 advantage, looking to take this best of 5 series in as good a form as possible, but Jjakji more than capable of evening this up. We'll see how Jjakji decides to approach this game. Obviously, Heavy Rain does make for an interesting map choice. Particularly Zerg players tend to be going for a swarm host style of play on that map recently. We've seen Jaedong do it to devastating effects, and well-positioned swarm hosts on Heavy Rain just make life so difficult for their opponents. So we are seeing quite a lot of lengthier games on Heavy Rain, in spite of the fact that it's a rather small map. So it's an interesting dynamic in the map pool, to say the least. Not something we're used to. Most of the smaller maps tend to play out quite quickly, whereas larger maps like Frost tend to play out a little bit more slowly, and players tend to build up a much heavier macro base. But we'll see if that's the case in this game, or whether we will see some of these players trademarked aggression. Looks like Jjakji is going to be scouting out. Actually, oh, no, this SCV's decided he's going to take a little bit of a break and patrol a ramp. Going to leave the scouting to the Reaper, which is now on the way. If we check out Hyun's base, we can see his spawning pool has gone down after the hatch, so got a fairly standard opening from Hyun. I'm curious to see if he will take a quick third base. Frost, obviously much larger map. Third base a lot easier to take on this maps than it is on other maps. And you've got a stack of options depending on whether you want to play passive and drop your third base away from your opponent, or those players that tend to play a more aggressive style will drop their third base up in this location, because one, it'll get your creep spread halfway towards your opponent, and two, it forms a much easier staging ground, and units can fall back to defend it just a little bit easier. Is Reaper going to scout out and find Hyun straight away? And already a few Zerglings here in place, so the Reaper not going to be able to do a whole lot of damage to the drone line, but could potentially pick off a few of these Zerglings if he's careful. Unfortunately, using that cliff, going to be able to continue to harass these Zerglings, so not managing to actually pick a whole lot of them off yet. No, in fact, none of the Zerglings have gone down, so that's a nice effort. Oh, there we go. First one does go down, but the other 5 Zerglings still in play. Pretty impressive effort from Hyun to micro those and just ensure that he keeps as many of them alive as possible. Second Reaper here does up the ante just a bit, though they are going to drop up straight into the face of those Zerglings, take a substantial amount of damage. This Reaper, will he be able to get out? I think the Queens are going to pick him up there, and indeed they do. So second Reaper does add a bit of pressure, but unfortunately Hyun just too well prepared for that, manages to pick that off quite quickly. So Hyun going to power along, continue to produce drones out after this, and we have 3 Queens on the field, 4th one coming up now. So I think we're going to see Hyun with more of that fantastic creep spread that he's been exhibiting thus far in the tournament, just powering forward here. 2 creeps dedicated to spreading that creep forward. We're actually already up to 20 drones in the main, so if we check out the income tab, already 29 harvesters to 22, and no signs of stopping inside as Hyun continues to power these forward. You can see Jjakji going for a fairly standard Terran opening, whereby they try and dominate the map with these early Hellions. Gives them a lot of map control against Zerg, particularly the gasless Zerg opening that Hyun's gone for. As you can see, only the gas and the main have been taken, and they weren't actually taken till the 6-minute mark. So there's not actually a lot in the way of upgrades on the way. Metabolic boost still not started, so against non-speed Zerglings, these Hellions are going to reign supreme. Going to give Jjakji the map domination that he'd like, and hopefully he'll be able to expand behind this. As you can see, he's got 3 CCs already, going to be producing some SCVs, and hopefully taking a fairly quick third base. So there's the fairly standard sort of metagame that we're seeing here between Terran and Zerg. When Zerg do go for quite a gasless opening. Terran do tend to get map control for the first, perhaps the 7 to 11 minute mark, and they use that to try and get up a third base of their own a lot easier than they're used to. Particularly a quick Zergling speed build makes it a lot harder for the Terran player to secure their third, but certainly Zerg players doing with these style openings tend to actually lose that map control to the Hellions for the first few minutes of the mid-game. Of course, once things like Mutalisk pop out, Hellions become a little bit more redundant, and the game shifts from this early sort of Terran map control through to the Zerg trying to push the Terran back as quickly as possible, whilst the Terran tries to parade push on the Zerg's third base. So there are a few dynamics that change between the games, but a lot of the Terran versus Zerg matchups will start fairly similar, as most of our pro players have sort of come to a consensus that the most effective opening for both these races is the gasless opening for the Zerg, whereby they get up their production and their queens and things as quick as possible, get their creep spread going. As you can see, only 8 minutes in, this creep spread's already quite off the chart. We have queens pushing it forward in every avenue and branching out quite quickly. So it's going to give great map vision to Hyun. Also, using overlords to block those potential third bases is going to slow down Jjakji just a little bit. Jjakji up in his production now. We have a starport on the way, along with some more barracks being thrown down. So it's going up to 5 barracks now for Jjakji. He's going to produce a heck of a lot of units to put pressure on Hyun. Hyun actually starting to produce a few roaches of his own. He's almost saturated his third base. Fourth base potential to go down any time now. So Hyun's doing a great job of having sufficient units out on the map that he can actually safely expand behind it, and enough units to put pressure on Jjakji should he so desire. Jjakji actually going for a lot more Marauders in this game, which is nice. Certainly going to be a nice counter to all these roaches that are in play. A few Marines coming up, but we'll see just sort of what composition Jjakji intends to go to. You're certainly going to need some Marines for the inevitable Mutalisk. You go too Marauder heavy, and you will just be giving the game away to the Zerg player that Muta switches on you. So always got to be careful with the composition you pick. Hyun just apparently roaches are the way to go for Hyun. Going to drop another 15 roaches behind this. We have +1/+1 finished, and Hyun just barreling forward with what's turning out to be a massive roach sledgehammer here. Injects nicely timed on these hatcheries, so going to keep this aggression right up to speed, and the roaches just flooding their way across the field. So we've got quite a few Marauders here to defend. SCV's being pulled off the line to try and ensure that these bunkers do not go down, but there's just too many roaches. Oh, actually forced to pull back there. That's nice hold there from Jjakji, but Hyun's sizing up. He's trying to work out if he can actually make his way through it. Plenty of Marauders here actually supplying a lot of damage for Jjakji, and it looks like Hyun's unable to quite make it through there at the moment, but this will form quite a bit of a contain as Jjakji can't afford to move out just yet. Doesn't have sufficient Marauder count. Has plenty of Marine production. Unfortunately, only going to be producing Marauders one at a time, and Hyun swinging another Overlord through to block that third base yet again. Is going to get very frustrating for Jjakji as he has to go and clean up that Overlord yet again and wait to drop the third base. So Hyun continuing to produce these roaches like crazy, and throwing down a Hydra Den for a bit of nice added DPS. And I like this choice from Hyun, throwing down his 2/2 upgrades, grabbing the Hydralisk, going to add a lot of DPS to this force. The Marines do insane amounts of DPS, but armoured roaches do make it a little bit harder. A few roaches just going for broke, trying to sneak their way through into the main base. Actually going to make it through into the natural. A big engagement here on the right, and Hyun's going to clean up quite a few SCVs as it looks like Jjakji's been caught out of position here. So we can see the SCV count continuing to fall. 7 SCVs falling to that pressure, which is a little bit of a problem for Jjakji, as he's really struggled to get this third base down. We see Hyun, who's actually managed to take his 4th base now in the bottom location here. So Hyun managing to go up to 4 bases quite safely, whereas Jjakji is still sitting on 2.5 bases. This third base only just starting to mine now. A lot of mules being dropped there to try and supplement the income. Marines and Marauders doing the very best they can to try and move out, but they're sitting in the midst of creep, and there's a hugely dangerous position to try and engage in. As you can see, they can't even get back off the creep quick enough, and Hyun just barreling down onto these units. Too bold, I think is the expression, or a bold move as Kerrigan would say. Hyun just continuing to push these units straight off. Massive supply differential, 199 to 138, and unfortunately for Jjakji, advancing just a little bit prematurely there. You don't want to push it that far on a creep without clearing it out, and I think Jjakji is going to pay for that that decision making. So Hyun continuing to posture here at the third base, wanting to take this out. If he can break the third base here, it will be game over for Jjakji. This siege tank on the high ground goes down very quickly, but stimmed up Marines and Marauders doing a lot of damage to these Roaches. Hydra's behind, providing so much DPS. I think Hyun wants to focus down these medevacs. Medevacs doing so well with their heal, making Jjakji's force very cost effective, but unfortunately there's too many Zerg units here. 32 Roaches on the way for reinforcements, and things looking very grim for Jjakji, who can only produce one Marauder at a time. And these Marines are pretty good, but don't do DPS near quick enough to Roaches, so the 30 odd Roaches that are streaming towards this force now are going to be more than enough to put substantial pressure on this third base. And I think this is going to provide a very difficult dilemma for Jjakji to deal with. He's wanting to counterattack here, but there are plenty of Roaches somewhere, actually. They seem to only be rallied down at the fourth base. So a little bit surprised that Hyun's not continuing to go with these. We have these medevacs moving out, but spotted by this creep, and this is one of the important things, Zerg players. If you haven't noted this in this game, Hyun's creep spread absolutely off the chart. Not only did it allow him to get a great engagement before in the midst of the creep over here, but it's also spotting these drops as they move out. So Jjakji just unable to make things work with the counterattacks, as if he barrels his way on a creep, he gets caught. There's just so much of it, too much to even clean out. Queen's right outside Jjakji's base, literally laying that tumour almost in range of the siege tank. It's right there on the edge of the range, and this is insane creep spread. 16 minutes to be at your opponent's base on Frost with your creep. It's almost unheard of. First siege tank does go down. Second one, a little bit better position. The Hydras can't reach it from the low ground, but there are just so many Roaches. They barrel their way up, and they're going to focus it down. The last few units trying to make a valiant stand here, but Hyun just continuing to push back. Siege tank on the high ground does the best they can, but unfortunately it's too close. These units will be able to kill it from the low ground. Hydras can start cleaning up these medevacs if they so choose, and I think Hyun would be well served to try and focus those down. The factory actually getting cleaned up here. Oh, Tech Lab almost going down. It's starting to burn down. The siege, no siege tanks will be able to produce once that does go down. So Hyun, nice choice of focus firing here. One siege tank will complete, but there won't be any further siege tanks behind this. Even a contaminate on the barracks with the Marauders, and that's a great choice from Hyun. Going to prevent Jjakji producing anything but Marines, and Marines just not the right unit against Roaches, of which we have a steady stream in production. 180 supply to 84, and I think the writing may be on the wall here for Jjakji in game number 2, as Hyun just continues to do so much damage here. Third base, there's just virtually no way that this can be held. Hyun reinforcement Roaches sweeping up into the space. Few Marines and Marauders trying to make what they can of the situation. Unfortunately, SCV's being forced to be pulled, and Hyun just going to be able to take out this third base. In fact, it will be taken out there, and I think that is the beginning of the end, unfortunately, for Jjakji. He's almost mined out in his main and natural, and Hyun just able to contain with this heavy Roach play. So unfortunately, second barracks finally up with that Tech Lab, but it may be too little too late. Roach is going to focus down this factory. 2 siege tanks all at the left. SCV's pulled to try and make a stand here, but the Roach sledgehammer just much too strong as they barrel their way through these Terran forces. I think this may be GG for Jjakji. Marauders valiantly trying to do work here, but there's just too much Roach Hydra, and Jjakji taps out of game number 2. So as we review that game, I think there was a few key points. One of the things that so many Zerg players just completely overlook is the creep spread. They do it, and they get to a certain point about halfway through the map, and they think that's okay, that's sufficient. But look at the control that Hyun had. His creep all the way over his opponent's side of the map. He's literally moving up his opponent's ramp with creep. The third base about to be covered with creep at the 19-minute mark. It's just insane, and the creep right to the edge of the map helped pick up future drops, even dropping a spore crawler in that line of advance, so there won't be any counterattacks in Hyun's in Hyun's natural. That'll be caught unawares. Creep so good for vision, great for reinforcing, and you see that Hyun just had an answer to everything Jjakji tried to throw at him. So for those of you who aren't aware, Hyun is now 2-0 in this series. Going into game number 3, if Hyun takes that one on Habitation Station, he will take out the series. Let's see if Jjakji can make some sort of recovery here, or is Hyun just going to walk his way into the grand finals in 3-0 style? Find out here on Aussie StarCraft.